Up here on the back side of False Live Oak Point, all this area back in here, out around the rocks, these deeper edges of the rocks and stuff inside as well, inside the rocks. We've had our tides drop out on us, so we've had super low tides here on the backside of this big full moon that we've had, which was pretty productive in and around that time frame. We're transitioning away from that full moon now, fixing to get into the wild card days, and that's where you want to be able to just be adjustable as far as what your size, your profile, color, everything. You want to have a multiple choice of things that are in there so you can give yourself the best opportunity. Water temps have been consistently in the mid 50s. Like these big bluebird skies days that we've had for the last couple of days have helped warm the water up somewhat as well. So all that stuff comes into consideration, and it has to factor into your fishing day. But primarily these areas around this is all mud, and that's our main focus: mud and grass and clump shell. So you get the rock formations that's around the wall that's out there on False Live Oak, and you can work that on that deeper edge again with the tides being out. So just be careful. There's a bunch of reefs that are up in this area. If you fished it, you'll know that. Like in the second chain islands, all that stuff there will be sticking out. And you got a few other little reefs that are just there off Ayers Point that's going to be the same type of way. And then, of course, around False Live Oak, you got some of these little small reefs that will stick out of the water as well. But they'll give you opportunity to fish that structure. I've been wading on the inside of this pretty easily. Like I say, it's manageable. It's a little squishy in some spots, but you can deal with it. It just depends on what your conditions are, especially if you got a big front that's pushing in, or you got some type of higher wind. You can get on the inside of those rocks and stay somewhat protected. But we've had fairly decent success in and around this point, and then of course you can come right over here into Mustang Lake. Mustang, another good little area, got a bunch of mud, grass, scattered shell that's in here. It gives you opportunity in and around that. Of course, back shoreline, all this here, all over here in the corner and everything. Great areas. Again, paying attention to what your tides are. We've had some negative tides, so sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to fish, depending on the type of boat that you got to be able to get in there. So you may want to stay out closer to the ICW side where that has that little drop, that little edge that's out there. But again, always pay attention to your barge traffic because it creates a lot of current when those boats come by there. So main baits that we've been throwing, been in our down south, been pretty much throwing the burner shad and the original size shad in Texas Tea, Big Papa, Magic Grass, Bone Diamond, White Ice. All those flavors have been pretty good for us. Been throwing the Corkies, Corky Originals. Corky Devil is another one that you can put in your arsenal. If you haven't thrown one of those, it's really kind of a versatile bait there. You have the bigger profile head, but with kind of a tail action that's with that. So that bait's really can be very productive. We've thrown it a little bit with a little bit of success, not a tremendous amount. More of our suspended baits like your Double D and your Corkies have been the ticket, have been done really well for us in that depth of water, that thigh to waist deep water. In the knock and tail lures, it's been Rogue, Heavy Metal, Greenback, all those three flavors right there for knock and tail have been very good. And then of course we sprinkled in some Marker 54, the shrimp as well, to see if we can generate some type of strikes with either trout, redfish, maybe even flounder or two. It's just kind of bounce that thing off the bottom down there on that edges like that over that mud. So all those have been fairly good for us. In an array of colors, so there's not any one particular thing that's just been more standout as the other, but just the different actions on those. Mirrodines, soft dines as well. Soft Dine XL has been another particular bait that's done well for us, working off the deeper edges early in the morning, because our water temp's been chilly to start the day, so we're working off those deeper edges, maybe like the ICW, or if you got a cut or a gut that you want to fish that's typically 4 to 5 feet deep or something to that effect like that, you can work that down into those. And typically we have had pretty good success, especially with the suspended baits. Of course, we're using 16th ounce, maybe even 32nd ounce jig head, depending on water temp. If we really want that bait to just kind of float down in the water columns for us to try to locate and find these fish that are hanging up in here. But again, we've been working around the majors and minors, especially with the full moon. You get it early in the morning and get it late in the evening. There's been some good opportunities that have come in and around that time frame. Of course, your midday majors have been it's been okay. I'm not a big fan of fishing full moon midday, so but when you do, if you are going to do that, try to get that major in there for you so that it gives you the best opportunity. But again, water temps have been important. Big fluctuating tides of coming in and coming out, basically because of that big moon that's pushing and pulling all this water at her. So you got to take all that stuff in account when you're wanting to fish these areas. But just stick with it, be patient with it, and you'll find and locate your fish. Up here in Spalding, again, when these big tides coming out of here, we got negative tides again. It's one of my favorite areas to fish because you got lots of opportunity to fish these back lake and these mouths that dump out of these little areas here. And then it opens up the big flat that's out in front of it that's out there as well. So all that becomes into play. So you can, as long as you got some bait that's working up there in and around it, you should be able to locate and find some fish that are hanging up there. We've been kind of working around the fingers up here a little bit, and then of course on the other, the old ICW up here on the back side of Dunham, all this area up in here. So you've got this deep little drop here off this where that shell cuts through there. That's old ICW that used to come through this particular area. So it gets really deep. So this is kind of when the focus is when we've had this chillier weather, or water, should I say. Get on that mud side where that shell comes out to it. Just be careful when you get out there because it's not a gradual drop off. It's it's pretty steep cut. So just make sure you don't get too close to it because you put yourself in a little bit of peril if you get there too far out of it. But yeah, it's a very deep little gut that runs through there. It's 18 to 20 feet, believe it or not, and then it just shallows back up real abruptly. So if you're going to run your boat through, just make sure you got the right track for it. But anyway, fishing these types of areas early in the morning. Of course, you got a muddy flat that's adjacent to it. You got shell that's around there, so it kind of gives you all the structure stuff that you're really wanting to fish over this time of year. But again, the suspended baits have been the main thing for us. Throwing it down off into the middle of that thing. And of course, when that current's really rolling through there, it's hard to keep those baits down in that bottom down there and try to locate. It's really pushing it or pulling it out. So if you can kind of catch it with the tide is starting to get slack on you in there, then just kind of work those edges. Just remembering it's a deep cut that's run through there. So if you're going to throw a Fat Boy or an original or the Corky Devil or something to that effect that really suspends like that and just continues to float down into that water column, or maybe even put you a little bit lighter, or tad bit heavier jig head if you're going to throw a plastic down off in that deeper water as well. Some of these fish are suspending down to 6, 7, 8 feet, just kind of based on how far we're letting the bait drop and when we're getting our opportunities. Now, have they been a production or been a bunch of baits or a bunch of fish that we've caught out of? No, we've pulled a few out, just kind of reaffirming our thought process on that deeper water, early, shallow water, late. And then you get up here on this big flat that's up here after a few hours of sunshine on it, then you'll start seeing some bait start working in these areas, and those fish will start coming out of that deeper water to feed. So that's the theory behind it, and that's what we just kind of reaffirm with that and want to keep pushing them and proving that theory right more often that we do that. So again, work these areas really well. Patience is really big this time of year because sometimes these bites just not coming super fast or furious. So if you see the signs where you've got bait, you got the structure, everything that you need, stick with it. Especially if you can work it all the way through a major or minor time frame, whenever that is. But keep that in mind, just the patient side of it, and be persistent with how you're working baits, and don't get bored with it because you'll get your opportunities, and sometimes more than not, your opportunities may be a very nice quality fish in an area like this. Over here on Newcomb Point, Newcomb Bend, and working these areas out here again with the big these tides that have pushed out, and we've got negative tides, so you got an edge that's out here a little bit deeper. It's been accessible for us because of that, which is about 150 yards offshore there. You can work that edge, and we've found some decent trout hanging out there in that deeper water. Typically, we're not getting super many opportunities early, but we're getting an hour to 2 hours into our day in the morning time, and we're starting to see a little bit of activity, especially out there on those drop edges like that and around these points. As you work down in here into Newcomb Bend in this area back here, all that becomes nice and in play because, like I say, you got all the right structure that's in place here. You got shell, you got grass, you got mud. It's going to give you some opportunities. You got a couple little small back lake mouths that dump off into it, so you got a little bit of a gut that's there that you may find a redfish or two laying up in that, and what's kind of what we've aimed at and looking for back in these areas like that, just to see if we've got few fish, abundant fish, not so many, but it just gives us other opportunities during this time of year. This is what's the stuff that you really want to be over. Again, majors and minors have been the main thing, the same flavors in this that we mentioned earlier in the down south. Of course, water clarity has been pretty good, especially after these fronts have pushed in that water, or that wind settles down, the water settles, so it's really super clear. So you want to throw a little bit more translucence baits like your Mirror Lure Little Johns and the Golden Red Glitter, the kitchen sink have been good. Burner Shad, Firecracker, Mud Minnow have been good. Supernatural in that size. The original sizes in Magic Grass, White Ice, Bone Diamond have been good for us. Even some Watermelon Red, flavored, kind of mixed in there. The Big Papa, all those flavors there have been good, but in the smaller profile. Of course, the soft dine has been good for us, and just a mullet flavor with the gray back or gray sides and black back has been good. You can move in that soft dine XL, kind of gives just a little bit different profile. If you see something that kind of works in that area, if you're catching some opportunities with those smaller baits, just kind of move it up one just a little bit just to see. Just kind of probing the water to see if they want that bigger profile bait. That's the only way you're really going to know for sure. But anyhow, areas like that have been good for us. Of course, again, with the negative tides, we've been able to work further away from the shoreline out over more mud and stuff. So it's really given us some unique opportunities typically probably would not get when we have a regular tide in there. But yeah, again, just what I mentioned in the last video, patience and persistence, man. This time of year, you really got to just kind of hang in there and hang in there and hang in there until you get your opportunity, and you'll get rewarded for it. So again, don't get frustrated with it. Just understand that it may take a little bit for it all to come into play. But again, like throwing the knocking tails with the 16th ounce jig heads, the down south with the 16th ounce jig head, and then of course we've been bouncing the double D's in and out of these guts and letting those things kind of to work in there for us as well. And then bouncing the marker 54, the shrimp, off of those guts as well, and off the point and back there in the mud and in the grass and stuff has led to some pretty decent fish as far as being caught back in those areas. But anyway, we're getting the productivity out of it. We're getting opportunities, and that's the main thing that we're looking for when we go out here to fish. So again, just be aware of what your weather situations and your tides. That's the biggest thing right now, is how much water's coming and going. You don't want to put yourself in an area where you can't get out of. So anyhow, just continue to be safe out there. Work all your looking for your signs to find and locate your fish, and enjoy your day on the water.